Good evening, and welcome to Cognitum, a show dedicated to the present and future of science and technology. I'm your host, Iosif Gershteyn. Tonight we have a very special episode filmed on-site at the Biomarkers of Aging 2024 conference, held at the Joseph B. Martin Center at Harvard Medical School, an event that gathers the brightest minds across science, medicine, and technology, united by the mission of unlocking and understanding the mysteries of aging. For a century, the idea of extending human life was confined to myth, but today, thanks to cutting-edge research, we're not just asking how we age, we're exploring how to measure, manage, and even reverse it. Biomarkers, those biological signals hidden in our cells and tissues, are the keys to this puzzle. They're revolutionizing how we diagnose diseases, track health, and predict the future of our bodies. Over the next hour or so, you'll hear from the pioneers driving this revolution. Biologists, biotech visionaries, and clinical leaders will share their insights on how biomarkers could redefine everything from personalized medicine to the progression of aging. What does it mean to slow or even halt biological aging? And how close are we to making it a reality? This isn't just a scientific journey, it's a deeply human one. Behind every breakthrough is a vision of a world where longer lives mean healthier lives, where age becomes just a number, and where we have the tools to thrive, not just survive. So join us as we explore the frontiers of aging science, hear from the leaders shaping this field, and ask the big questions about the future of longevity. Hi, Aubrey. Great to see you again.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Would you be so kind as to introduce yourself to our audience?
Sure. So I'm Dr. Aubrey de Grey. I work on aging. I'm not in favor of it. I am trying to fix it. And I lead a nonprofit based in California named LEV Foundation. We're focusing on mouse experiments, trying to bring aging under really comprehensive medical control in mice, especially with treatments that are truly rejuvenating. In other words, we start with middle-aged mice, and we're interested in making them biologically younger and therefore living healthy for longer and therefore living for longer. And it's going okay.
How did you get interested in aging?
I got interested in aging rather late in life, actually. I was already 30. I mean, of course, a lot of people don't get interested until they start suffering from aging. For me, I'd always known that aging was the world's most important problem. The thing I didn't know until about the age of 30 was that other people didn't think that way. I went into artificial intelligence research at first, and while I was doing that, I met and married a biologist. And it turned out she wasn't interested in aging. And it turned out all the other biologists that I was meeting through her were also not interested. And I thought, well, that won't do, so I switched fields.
Mm-hmm. And how did that go?
Well, I guess I did all right. I mean, I already knew that there was quite a distinguished history of people who switched fields doing well in science. Like the whole of molecular biology was invented in the 1950s by a bunch of physicists. And so I'd done all right in my AI research, and I thought, well, okay, I know how to work on really hard problems, and I come in like not so encumbered by the conventional wisdom, so to speak. Maybe I'll have some new ideas, and that's what happened. About 5 years in, I guess, in the year 2000, I had this kind of eureka moment of realizing that reversing aging by repairing the damage that the body does to itself throughout life is actually going to be easier than slowing aging down, which is what everyone else had been focusing on. And that took a long time to be accepted as even remotely plausible, but now it's a pretty mainstream idea.
That would be the strategies for engineering negligible senescence.
Exactly that, yes. I crystallized it into a system of 7 different categories of damage, each of which I talked about a particular generic method for how we might actually implement this damage repair, this maintenance. And so that's basically stood the test of time pretty well. It was kind of, in 2013 there was this very famous paper called The Hallmarks of Aging, which is by far the most highly cited paper in the whole field of the whole century. And it's essentially a rehash of what I said 10 years earlier before hallmarks were cool.
And Of these 7 categories that you delineated in the original paper in 2000, it's been 24 years. It's the year 2024, closing in on 2025. Which do you think are the most promising and the least promising of the 7 categories?
Well, first of all, I want to emphasize that that's the wrong question, because the whole point of this approach is it's a divide and conquer approach, and we can't just leave any of them behind. We can't just prioritize each of them between them. We can, however, prioritize within them. One thing that has happened very much in the past 24 years is that alternative approaches for each of the categories have come along. So, just to illustrate, one of the categories is cell loss, cells dying and not being automatically replaced by the division of other cells. And 24 years ago, the only way we had that might even slightly be plausible to do anything about that was stem cell therapy. You put in new stem cells that divide and differentiate to replace the cells that the body is not replacing on its own. But now we have this thing called partial reprogramming, where the cells that are already in the body, the resident cells, can be rejuvenated and made more regenerative, more stem-like. And that may end up being a much more practical alternative. And if I look at some of the other categories, the same thing has happened. We've got multiple approaches that look promising now. So in that sense, yes, absolutely, we've got kind of a league table. And it keeps shifting, of course, as progress gets made in any particular technology. But we should not be considering any kind of hierarchy as between the categories themselves, because we've got to do all of them. And actually, that has really been a strong emphasis of most of my time, most of the work I've done over the past 20 years, is to make sure that the most difficult categories, the ones where none of the approaches are particularly easy to actually implement, are not neglected. Because, basically people in academia and also people in industry are terribly short-termist, right? They have enormous pressure to get results quickly.
What do you think are the most exciting developments that you see happening in the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, I think we've got a pretty good chance in the next 5 years or so of really cracking aging in mice. In other words, the kind of experiments that we're doing now to combine a whole bunch of different interventions in middle-aged mice and get them to live longer, I believe that we've got a very good chance within the next 5 years of getting those things to achieve an amount of life extension that is completely out of sight compared to what anyone's achieved so far with simpler approaches. At the moment, if you take a typical mouse, which would normally live on average about 2.5 years, and you wait until it's 1.5 years old before you do anything to it at all, so that's what I meant by middle age, right? So they're not yet sick, but they're not very far away from becoming sick. If you throw whatever you like at them at this point, the best you can get is about 4 months of additional life. So supposing you could get a whole year, that's 3 times the effect size, right? That's what we're aiming for, and we believe that that will be enough to completely change society's attitude to aging and its malleability for humans. It'll still obviously be a little while after that before the corresponding amount of progress is made in humans themselves, which I would say would be something like getting 20 years of postponement of the health problems of late life. But people will at least be trying, whereas now they're not really trying.
And do you see this as being a single intervention or a combination of interventions to get to the 1-year extension on the mouse?
It will definitely be a combination. In fact, it might be a big combination. We did 4 interventions in the study that we're doing right now that started early last year, and it hasn't really cracked it. If I want to take a single takeaway from the first study that we've done that is nearly complete now, then it would be that we're probably not hitting enough of the bases. We're not sufficiently comprehensive, and therefore we probably need to try 6 or 8 interventions together rather than 4.
And without a single element, it's the weakest link, right? That's
well, right.
the idea.
This is it, yes. I mean, you've got all of these various types of damage accumulating in the body, and they all transition into actual functional decline of one kind or another at around the same age. That's kind of an immediate consequence of evolutionary pressure. There's no point in having machinery to have one type of damage accumulate unnecessarily slowly if everything else is going to kill you first, right? So they all kind of equal out in terms of the age at which they become pathogenic. And that means that unless you slow down all of them, you're going to die of something fairly soon, at pretty much the same age that you die at the moment of one or other of these things. So yes, that's why we have to hit all of them.
And when you're assuming that you're successful with stacking 4 to 8 interventions to get the 1 year plus increase in lifespan and hopefully health span of these mice,
Yep.
how do you see the thesis on translation when there are so many different distinct mechanisms between mouse and human?
So there's an enormous culture change that will be required with regard to the medical profession. At the moment, medics know perfectly well that they are experimenting, that they're essentially, using a lot of trial and error to get anything to work at all, because each individual is different and so on. And so they try to keep things simple. People really don't like giving combination therapies at all, but we're just going to have to bite that bullet. And I think when it is seen that it can work in an organism that, is a bit like us, it's got 4 limbs and fur and stuff, then, it's going to be enough of an incentive to actually bite that bullet and actually design not just the actual clinical approach, but also the regulatory approach for approval of things, so as to ensure that that such treatments can be developed in a timely fashion and made available.
Mm-hmm. Well, given we're at the Biomarkers of Aging conference, do you have particular faith in a specific single biomarker?
Absolutely not. At this point, there's enormous progress and, of course, enormous excitement right now with regard to the modern biomarkers of aging, the epigenetic ones, the proteomic ones, and so on. And, there's great progress being made. I would say that right now, there's still a little way to go to get those biomarkers really ready for prime time, really to be an improvement on the more traditional things, the functional ones like gait speed and grip strength and cognitive measures. But they probably will get there. However, the biggest challenge is to develop biomarkers that can be surrogates of clinical outcomes for interventions. At the moment, we've moved on from the original first generation clocks that could basically tell you how old you are, which you kind of knew already, right? To the second generation ones, which are pretty good at telling you how biologically old you are, how soon you're going to start exhibiting the health problems of late life. But that's all in the context of no interventions. What we need is clocks that can be used to say, well, okay, you take this intervention. If the clock goes down, you can be really quite sure that it is going to, that the intervention is going to extend your healthy life. And if it doesn't, you can be reasonably sure that it's not going to extend your healthy life. We are nowhere near that yet.
And if people want to learn more, what would you recommend they would be pursuing?
Well, I mean, it's a question of what one wants to learn more about, of course. But if you want to learn more about the ways in which we are going to achieve longevity escape velocity and actually bring aging under comprehensive medical control, then definitely start by coming to our website, levf.org, and looking at the studies we're doing. I wrote a book a decade or more ago, in fact, 15 years ago, which describes the 7-point plan, the 7 deadly things, as I call them, and what we might do about them. That book is in severe need of being updated, but it's what's in there is not wrong. It's all stood the test of time. It just, there's more to say now. So yeah, those are good places to start.
Thank you so much for your time.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
My name is David Barzilai. I'm a medical doctor. I have a PhD in health services research, and I'm a diplomat of the American Board of Lifestyle Medicine. I combine these for various roles, from the evidence-based medicine side to lifestyle medicine, which is like diet, nutrition, exercise, with aging biology. Basically, my clients in longevity consulting and longevity medicine, they're interested in evidence-based best practices around health span or healthy aging. So I apply that science, and I think it's something that more doctors should be familiar with.
What's the difference between longevity medicine and medicine as it's commonly practiced now?
Well, the problem is that medicine as it's practiced today, it does incorporate some prevention, but not nearly as much as we need. about 80% of chronic disease are preventable through simple things like diet, exercise, good sleep, and optimal just medical management, things like being up to date with your screenings. And most doctors try to put their best efforts to do that as well as possible, but there are a couple challenges. One challenge is from the therapeutic side. I should say from the time side, actually. The amount of time you have to spend with a patient is so short. A lot of it is spent sort of putting out fires, catching someone's diagnosis of diabetes late in the game rather than maybe following it earlier to see if the blood glucose is rising, or giving nutritional advice and discussion to try to even avoid that situation in the first place. So that's a barrier, and I'd say the other barrier is there's very little understanding for most doctors of the biology of aging and potential for early, kind of a more proactive approach based on aging biology.
Mm-hmm. And have you seen results from your practice that you think are significantly different from the standard of care?
What I would say is the practice is mostly spent on optimizing what is already the standard of care that we could be doing more en masse. So the gap between, for example, the population that follows only one health habit versus the most, it's about a 20-year difference in lifespan and about a 10 to 15-year difference in health span, or just being disease-free, being healthy and vibrant. So a lot of it concentrates in where we have the real greatest pillar of evidence, which is optimal lifestyle practices. That and being proactive about things like early diagnosis through things like annual or regular screening, from MRIs to laboratory, to sort of tracking biomarkers of health, which can be simple things like how winded you are after certain routine exercise. Beyond that, there are other things that can be done. For example, things that I would like to become the standard of care, they're not yet the standard of care. There you can do things like get a whole genome analysis and understand what makes your biology different than other people's biology. You might have certain weaknesses that might be better complemented by things. And likewise, you might have certain strengths that may affect what the optimal health span regimen is for you. So I would say it incorporates the best practices more uniformly and then looks at a few things that have intermediate levels of evidence, but if you're looking to do more and you're making an educated decision, you could do more kind of high-tech solutions too, if you're interested.
And what are the most high-impact interventions that you generally prescribe to your clients?
I think the most high-impact prescription is exercise prescription, the dietary prescription, a whole foods-based diet, having a good body composition, including your muscle mass, your functional markers such as your aerobic capacity, or essentially how well your body is able to extract oxygen when you work out, which, when they do that treadmill test. So that's foundation. A lot of my clients are those that are already close to maxed out on those areas, and as a subspecialty in longevity medicine and longevity science, I basically help them get that extra incremental forward, as well as become aware of some of these things beyond what you might traditionally encounter in a physician office. That and the other thing is being more comprehensive. Like, I believe it should be like just a regular standard to check people's B12 level across the board. It's cheap. A lot of people are deficient. There are people with diets you would think would be adequate. It's still not adequate. So there's some biomarkers. By being a little more comprehensive, we can just achieve more to make sure we're not missing anything important.
And where do you see the field going over the next 5-10 years?
Well, I see it moving more towards, and this is one of my interests, something that I speak to. I'm faculty at a newly created Geneva College of Longevity Science. They have an executive master of science there. And it's this concept of precision medicine. Precision medicine needs more tools, and that's why conferences like this on the biology of aging are so instrumental, because it's by validating biomarkers of aging, you're able to validate whether longevity or health extending intervention works, and also you're able to then do that precision medicine. So what is that precision medicine that I think is the future? Precision medicine basically means personalized medicine that's unique to you. unique to your goals, your time horizon, but in particular, what are your genes, what is your lifestyle, and what are your concerns, what's your family history. So these biomarkers that are being validated at this conference are increasingly helping physicians to be able to track health progress over time. So you can tell not just what interventions might be most promising, which we talked about before, maybe based on your genetic background, but also how is it working? So you can adjust and pivot as you need to, depending on how one intervention is working or another. And it also gives us valuable feedback in terms of who might benefit most. For example, while still ongoing in terms of the level of validation, we're getting better and better being able to say not just how old someone is biologically, but their beyond biologic aging acceleration, it's the rate at which their biologic aging is increasing. So if you can look at that across different organs, both of those things, you can say, hey, your heart's doing pretty good, but your kidneys here, it's at the 20th percentile.
So if there was only one biomarker that you could be testing for or evaluating in order to see if someone's aging gracefully or not so much, which would it be?
That's a very good question. I think it's a little bit of a trick question, because I think I would say in general, of the methylation and other omics-based clocks, those that are second and third generation, I'm happy to take a deeper dive at a follow-up show if needed, but these higher generation biomarkers are getting better and better. But if you ask me today what the most accurate predictor of your future health status, it's a combination of those type of things, but most of all, functional biomarkers, things like your capacity to your strength, your capacity to run a certain distance. It's your ability to function. And there's ways to scientifically assess those in a way where you can compare yourself with others. Ultimately, it's going to take more than one, but a composite of the general and the specific with these cutting-edge aging biomarkers coupled with the traditional ones if we really want it to be most predictive for what we're interested in.
Thank you so much. Very exciting work.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
My name is Björn Schumacher. I'm directing the Institute for Genome Stability in Aging and Disease. And we are very interested in finding out how aging works.
So tell us more specifically, what does your institute do?
So we are specifically interested in how the building blocks of our basic information influences aging. The DNA encodes everything in the cell, in an organism. It's all the information. And the DNA can be damaged. And it undergoes damage all the time. And so it needs constant repair because it's the information content of the cell. So it cannot be replaced. And that sets DNA aside from any other biomolecule that we have. It has to be constantly repaired. And when humans are not able to repair the DNA, they can age very, very rapidly. And there are children that already age before their teenage because they cannot repair DNA. And that's what we want to find out.
And is this dream complex shared among species, or is it human specific?
The dream complex is very ancestral. We are studying in the lab a nematode worm, a very simple worm, 1 millimeter long, Caenorhabditis elegans it's called. It's the nematode worm. And there we discovered this link between dream and DNA repair. And this dream is exactly the same factor that we have in humans. And so that's why we can translate our studies in the simple worm to humans, and now also study in mice and how far we can have in a mammal really a health benefit of improving DNA repair.
And what kind of results have you seen by suppressing the dream complex in simpler life forms?
In simpler life forms, they make the animal resistant to DNA damage. They can repair all sort of different DNA damage much better than a normal worm. And then we validated that in a mouse that has a degenerative pathology. In this case, it was a degeneration of the retina, a very important age-related disease in humans. And we could prevent that by inhibiting dream pharmacologically and then preserve the function of the eye. And so that's why we can take our very basic discoveries in the worm into a higher animal, into a mammal, on the path to really develop that for the benefit of humans.
And are there small molecules that can inhibit the dream complex that you found?
Indeed, and that is really what is so exciting about it, because the dream complex is assembled when a specific kinase is operating on the complex, and this kinase we can inhibit pharmacologically. So we have these inhibitors that can inhibit the kinase, and the inhibition of the kinase leads to disassembly of the dream complex, and then the de-repression of the DNA repair genes. So repair genes are then induced, and so we can really pharmacologically with small molecules achieve better DNA repair.
So where do you see your field progressing over the next 5 to 10 years?
I think the real breakthrough is that for the very first time we can now target the real mechanisms of aging. Because thus far most of the interventions are metabolic interventions that can delay aging to some extent, but the interventions have not thus far targeted really the most fundamental root causal mechanisms of aging. And their DNA damage is really at the hierarchy the most upstream event, because it has consequences on everything in the cell. And that's why we can zoom in now on the causal mechanisms of aging and really target aging where it first is driven by. And that, I think, we will see real breakthroughs in combination to also, as we here learn at the Biomarkers of Aging conference, that we can make biological age measurable.
And given that we're at the Biomarkers of Aging conference, what do you think is the most important biomarker to pay attention to?
I think we need the plethora of biomarkers, and that's why omics technologies are so important for the biomarkers. Traditionally, there were like a few markers, a few diagnostic markers, and I think now with the field of omics technologies, so where you can look at many different changes in a cell, many different changes on molecules, you can now really get a plethora of data, and the combination of so many different data points give you then a very good assessment of age, and increasingly of biological age, because biological age can differ from chronological age. Some people age faster, some slower, some get sick earlier, some have a specific disease susceptibility, and we can make this all measurable. I personally think that transcriptomic clocks, which are based on gene activity, are very exciting, because they tell us a lot more than just the measurement of age. They tell us a lot more about what is going on in the cell, what processes are changed. And so I'm very excited about the developments on the so-called transcriptomic clocks. And I also find it very exciting that we learn now why clocks work so well, because aging is not a program. Aging is the default. And aging is increase of chaos, increase of dysfunction. And so we showed that recently that stochasticity alone can give us a very accurate prediction of age. How much randomness, how much noise have expanded on our molecular parameters.
That's fascinating, and your work is just very exciting. If people want to learn more about what you do, where should they look?
So we have, of course, a website, and everybody is very much welcome to get more information from our website at the Institute of Genome Stability in Aging and Disease, and also at the Cologne Excellence Cluster for Aging Research, which is one of the largest agglomerate of aging research in Europe. And of course, going to YouTube, watch some of the podcasts and the videos where we also explain to the general audience what we learned about aging. I very much invite your audience to join us and check out what we are doing.
Thank you so much for your time.
All right, it was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. We hope you join us next time as we examine and elucidate the frontiers of science and technology with the thinkers creating our future.